I'm Dina.
And I'm Suzanne, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Rise and Shine It's Hypnotime podcast.
With Dina and Suzanne.
That's us.
The purpose of this podcast is to help you along your healing journey, to become the very best version of you that you can be, and to create the life of your dreams. We want to give you the tools you need to succeed through personal stories, guided meditations, hypnosis, NLP, and self-hypnosis techniques, as well as interviews with experts in a variety of healing modalities, from energy workers and spiritual healers to chiropractors, acupuncturists, holistic medicine, and much, much more.
Yes, and we also want this podcast to be a place where people can come together, share stories, and be reminded that you're not alone. In fact, the healing journey is a lifelong journey, and we are just so thankful that you're choosing us to be a part of your journey and that we have you to be a part of ours as well. And with that being said, let's start the show.
I'm ready when you are.
Great.
Hey, welcome to Rise and Shine. It's Hypno Time with Dina and Suzanne, and we have a special guest today.
Yes, we do.
Her name is Jess, or Jessie. You like to go by Jess?
Jess, yep.
Jess Marion.
Yes, and we couldn't be more excited. She's a wealth of knowledge and super brilliant and just wonderful to listen to. So if you want, if you don't mind, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you started in hypnosis and NLP?
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much, guys, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And thank you, everybody who's either listening or watching. I'm so thrilled to share a little bit of my perspective. So how I got into hypnosis, that's an interesting question because I've always had an interest in altered states of consciousness, in hypnosis, and meditation. I think really my interest in hypnosis started when I was about 10 years old and I saw Paul McKenna do a demonstration on like some TV show where he helped somebody get over a fear of flying. And to my mind, it was like magic.
Right.
And I was very interested in everything magical. And I thought, wow, I want to know how did he do that? So that really sparked my curiosity for hypnosis. And then by the time I was 12, I had started a daily meditation practice. I was very interested in exploring my own inner world. And that just kind of continued. When I went to college, I was very fortunate because my university had an extensive library in terms of hypnosis works. So they had like the complete collections of everything and anything Erickson ever wrote.
Awesome.
The classic stuff from Bandler and Grinder. So in my free time, I just poured myself into these hypnosis books. And it was kind of an interesting phase because a lot of these books were written in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I'm there in the 2000s. And it was kind of like this weird dynamic of reading these very trancy texts that were from a very different time.
Right.
But it was enough to keep me intellectually very interested. I went on to do my master's. When I did my master's degree, I kind of put the hypnosis stuff aside. And when I went to start working on a PhD, at that point, I decided I needed something that was not in my academic background. My academic background, my master's is in religion, and I worked on a PhD in medical anthropology.
Wow.
So I needed something. Yeah, it's a very interesting field.
I bet.
But very academically rigorous. And between the academics and my responsibilities to the department, my responsibilities to my students at that time, I needed something that was not anthropology, was not higher learning. So I did my first hypnosis training when I was working on my PhD. I fell in love. It was like a 6-day intensive. And 2 weeks later, I opened my practice and I haven't looked back.
Where were you when who do you mind telling us who you got certified through as far as your hypnosis?
Sure. My initial hypnosis certification was with Igor Ledachovsky.
Awesome.
And then I went on to train with actually my business partners, Sean and Sarah Carson. And I went on to train with my main mentor, John Overdurf.
Oh, very
So
good.
That's my lineage.
Right. So why don't you tell us your preferred, the differences between your preferred practices, like therapeutic or generative, or which practice do you prefer and why?
Sure. So this is a great question, and I think it would be useful to just briefly talk about the differences between therapeutic change and generative change. Therapeutic change is what we typically think of when people go to see a hypnotherapist. It's like, I want to stop smoking. I want to stop biting my nails. I want to lose weight. Generally, therapeutic change is about stopping or doing less of a particular behavior, or stopping or feeling less of a particular state in a context. Like, I want to get over my fear of public speaking, for example.
Right.
Whereas generative change work is about doing more of something, enhancing something. So this could be something like sports hypnosis, and improving times if you race, or improving a golf swing. I don't often work in sports hypnosis. I tend to do a different type of generative coaching, where we're looking at the person as a holistic being. Right. And what are the things we can do to enhance well-being? What can we do to enhance happiness? What can we do to enhance life?
Right. And I guess the generative part of it would be building on what they already have, the foundation they already have, and allowing them to grow and progress forward.
Right. And here's the cool thing about it is everybody already has a foundation, even people who come for therapeutic change. So while I speak of these as two different things, because for hypnotists, they tend to be, in reality, you do not have generative change without some aspects of therapeutic change, because things will come up in the process that need to be addressed. There's going to be roadblocks that come up. There's going to be emotions that aren't always like the most resourceful that will come up. So there are elements of a therapeutic change within a generative series of sessions, or even a single session. On the therapeutic side, you help somebody quit smoking, you help them to lose weight, you help them to get over a lifelong fear of flying. That has tremendous generative quality to it, because we have no clue just how far that change will go. We don't know all of the wonderful things that will happen, because that person who came to see us, for example, simply learned that they can change. They can have control over their emotional responses.
Right.
So it's kind of like,
they recognize their empowerment or their ability to manage their life more readily, huh?
Right. So it's massively generative. So I kind of think of this as like the Tai Chi, the yin and the yang. They're not truly separate. There's a piece in each. For me personally, when I work with people, I tend to put my focus more on the generative side. So even if I'm working with somebody who wants to lose weight, or I'm working with somebody who wants to get over a fear or phobia, I'm going to shift the session to be more generative, because as far as I'm concerned, there's any client who comes in for any change on either side of the spectrum, there's nothing wrong with them. There is nothing we're actually fixing. Mm-hmm. We're just helping them to use their neurology, physiology, and psychology in more adaptive ways. So I don't like to focus on problems. I like to focus on solutions.
I like it.
With that said, there is a value in respecting the problem that a client comes in with. We don't want to whitewash it or pretend that it's not a real thing for the client, because it is. Right. Trauma is a real thing. So we have to pace that and respect that, to keep rapport. And also within a problem itself, we will find the solution. Oftentimes the problem is the solution.
Interesting. That's great.
Very good.
Yeah.
And can you just define really quickly what, because we appreciate your language and recognize it, like building rapport and keeping rapport, but maybe just define what rapport is, just for the people who are listening.
Sure. Sorry about the background sounds here. I am in New York City, so I don't know what the microphone's going to pick up.
No. The hustle and bustle.
Yeah. It sounds fine to us. I'm sure everybody else will just appreciate your voice and your language and your, offering your information.
Mm-hmm. And any sounds can just take you deeper.
Right. I love it.
Very good.
So rapport, just generally speaking, like in the non-therapeutic, non-change work world, rapport is like how you get on with somebody, your positive relationship with someone. In the sacred space of a coach and client, or a hypnotist and client, it takes on an even deeper meaning, because it is a type of relationship that allows change to naturally occur as a result of that relationship.
That's nice. Yeah, very good.
Very
Thank you for that explanation. Yeah.
You're welcome.
And so maybe would you mind telling us what are some key mindsets that can lead to greater happiness and abundance in life?
Sure. That's a great question. The first mindset that I would encourage everybody to adopt is to understand that your identity is not your emotions and it's not your thoughts. And it's especially not your behaviors.
Right.
You know, how many times do we have a client come in and say, well, I'm a smoker, or I'm too big, or I'm afraid of.
Yeah. So they're defining themselves by their feelings.
Yep.
Right.
100%. The two words, I am, and then whatever falls after that are the most powerful hypnotic suggestions we will ever give ourselves and ever experience in the world.
100%.
I love that. Why don't you just repeat that? Because that is so simple, but it's so valuable and important for anybody to understand the simple principle to apply to their life, even if they don't get anything else out of this, right?
Sure. So the phrase I am, first of all, you are your best hypnotist. You are your most powerful hypnotist. Anytime you think I am, even your name, like I am Jess, that's a hypnotic suggestion. I am not Jess. We are not our names, but we tell ourselves that over and over and over again. So we craft an identity around that suggestion. So when you think I am, whatever you put after that statement, make it empowering, because that is going directly into your deeper processing, your other than conscious processing.
Yeah, you're literally anchoring that to the brain. And then when you listen to the ambulance in the background, it did that little extra anchor, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. I planned it for everybody.
Wow.
So
very
I'm
good.
Thank you so much.
I am more than Dina.
Exactly. Because you are so much more than whatever you consciously think you are. You are absolutely more than that. So when we have problems that happen, when we have states, we have emotions that aren't feeling so good, or we're doing something that we would prefer not to do, those are not a reflection of our identity. Those are not a reflection of who we are. We aren't born that way.
Right.
They're simply a reflection of what has transpired and who we've been up until that point, which then gives us a decision point. We either keep going down that well-practiced road or we do something different.
There you go. But it helps you to be able to define it and see it as something outside of yourself that you have the opportunity to change, whether, and make choices with, manage it, change it, or very good.
Because, sometimes it's not enough to just recognize that, I'm not, whatever the negative feeling is I'm experiencing. Like if I'm feeling sad, I am not sadness. It is just in my system. Sometimes it's not enough to simply recognize that in order to change it. We have to do some things to change. So the next mindset is about being curious. Be deeply curious, especially about the behaviors and feelings that we would prefer not to experience. Being curious doesn't mean judging. It doesn't mean thinking, oh, I'm a failure or anything like that, because there we have that I am again. Being curious is, I wonder what that's all about. I wonder what's happening on a deeper level. If I peel away the layers of this experience, what will be revealed underneath?
Very nice.
I love that.
Yeah. And be curious about then, once you get there, how can you change it if it's something that isn't what you want it to be? So curiosity, whether you're a hypnotist or you are a normal human being, is one of the most powerful states we can experience as humans, because curiosity is a precursor for learning. It's a precursor for growth. It's what allows us to be more expansive.
Right.
So curiosity would be mindset number 2. And then mindset number 3 is flexibility.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
There's
you need
something
to be open and flexible to all different types of things. Doesn't mean we need to be gullible or just believe anything we're told, but to be open our mind and our thoughts and allow ourselves to find out more information and see what works with us, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So it's my friend Carlos Casado has a saying of it's good to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out.
There you go.
So, that's great. I'll tribute that to him. So you want to be flexible. There's a principle, it's in physics. We also adopted it into the NLP world, and it's called the Law of Requisite Variety. And it simply states that the most flexible component in any system holds the most influence.
Awesome.
And, we have all sorts of different systems. We have relationship systems. We have our internal systems. We have our larger communities. Whoever has the most emotional flexibility is going to be the most influential to that system. So
Very
flexibility
good.
is really important.
Great.
So there's lots of other things too, but I think that's a really good place to start for a lot of us.
So just without going into the detail, go ahead and name those 3 principles again.
Right. So it's understanding you are not your emotions, behaviors, or thoughts.
Okay.
So be careful with the I ams. The next is have a sense of open curiosity. Even for the stuff that's uncomfortable, be really curious about it, because that's how you're going to understand yourself better, and you're going to discover a lot more about who you are on a deeper level, which will give you more points in which you can change things that we might not find the most resourceful. And then finally, have flexibility with yourself and flexibility with others in your life.
And with what you're learning, right?
100%. Yep.
Exactly. That's great.
And I like the idea of looking at things with just curiosity as an observer, because it really does make it, I don't know, less scary if you're just, observing and taking it in, as opposed to just,
right.
Yeah, diving headfirst, trying to fix the problem, or, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. And I know that every client is different. They're all, my favorite saying is they're unique to themselves, even though a lot of situations are similar. They're very unique to each person. So that being said, is there a specific or a favorite approach that you have with the clients, or do you adjust it accordingly?
I adjust accordingly. So I would say, if a practitioner has one approach that they use with every client, they will have success.
Right.
Without a doubt, they will. However, it becomes very limiting for the practitioner because they become rigid in their approach. And then what do they do with like the 20% of clients where that approach doesn't work? Because it's always the 80-20 rule.
There you go.
So I prefer,
just like your 3 points, using the word I am. Of course, you want to be able to recognize that, but being curious and flexible, even when you're working with somebody. Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, 100%. And flexibility is key. So I don't have a favorite approach or technique. I go through phases where if I learn something new, I want to try it out with lots of people.
I do that.
I do that too. It's how you learn. It's how you integrate. And then eventually you let go of it. And then it just kind of integrates into this larger gestalt of your client work.
Or sometimes you come back to it, you forget because you overused it or whatever, and forget about it. And then when it reintroduces itself, it may be combining it with something else. So you've even, like you said, you expand your ability to be able to work with people. And I loved your class. I used some of your techniques when I took it up there at Hypno Thoughts Live last year.
Oh, thank you.
And I really did. You probably were one of the most impressive for me. You were one of my first classes, but you were also one of the most impressive because I could tell that the way you studied and delved into the intricacies as well as the overall rounded ability to use these and the different levels of technique. It was great for me. It was a great opportunity for me to expand my work. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, because sometimes we don't know how our classes come off in kind of these situations. So I really appreciate that. And, that class was a result of my own curiosity with clients.
Interesting.
Curiosity and playfulness, like what's going to work. This is interesting. I'm noticing about this, about this client. I wonder what happens if I match that, but make it a fractal, switch it slightly.
Oh yeah. I had fun in it. It was, thank you. I mean, I can't tell you. And I agree with you on that. When you hear somebody give you some feedback and it's positive feedback, then you realize what's working. And that goes with your clients or anybody you're working with, just to have them come back sometimes years later and say, you changed my life, or you gave me tools that helped me to change my life or whatever. So that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Nature abhors a vacuum. So negative feedback tends to not be useful because it doesn't tell somebody what to do. It just says what the other person doesn't like or what not to do.
Or what not to do, right.
So this is like a really useful thing just in life in general. If you're going to give a piece of feedback, it's really useful to, first of all, make sure there's positivity in the feedback. So point out the things that you liked. And if there's something that you didn't like or you thought the person could do better, as long as you have permission to give that feedback, because we don't always have that permission.
Right.
To phrase it in a way that helps them expand versus contract. Meaning, if I'm watching one of my students present for the first time, say, hey, can I give you some feedback? I might say, hey, I really like, I liked how you use your gestures. I really enjoyed the subject matter. Can I give you a piece that will help you stretch and grow?
There you go.
Say yes, then I might say, it might be really powerful if you stand more grounded instead of moving so much, instead of pacing. It might be really empowering for you to pick a spot and just stand for a while versus, somebody who is more on the negative saying, you moved around too much. I couldn't track what you're doing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Even the
critique
sounds like a compliment when you put it that way.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And it's received so much easier. And this is, like you said, this is involving any part of your life, whether you're teaching your children or whether you're in a friendship or a relationship. If you can look at somebody and say, I really love the way you do this. And if you added this, it would even be more influential or more, empowering or more inviting. There's just so many different ways that we can, but we have to be aware of the verbiage first, right?
We have to be aware of the verbiage, and we have to be aware of permission, where permission is unconsciously given and where it's not. Because sometimes somebody will say yes, but their body is saying, do not go there. Mm-hmm. And if you go there, it is a violation, and they're not going to listen.
Right. They're going to block it or reject it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm one of my hobbies is I'm a weightlifter, and I was in the gym. This is about 2 months ago. And I was lifting, I was fine, no problem. And there was some athlete in the gym who I've never met before. I don't know this person. They came over and they're like, hey, can I give you feedback? And it's a socially awkward situation. You kind of have to say yes, but everything in my physiology and tonality said no. But this person does not pay attention to the nonverbal cues.
Right.
So they gave me their feedback, and I had some choice words that I said to them internally. And then I got on with my day and kept on doing what I was doing. Whether or not that feedback was useful, it didn't even matter. I'm not going to hear it because I didn't want it.
Right.
So we need to be mindful of that and respecting people's boundaries. And sometimes there is social pressure to say yes.
Exactly. Just by somebody approaching you and saying, hey, can I? It's hard to say, no, you can't.
Yeah,
right.
Because you don't want to come off being the bad guy.
Right.
So it becomes really important for us to pay attention to those nonverbal cues, which you don't have to be an expert coach to do that. We're taught from children, from childhood on what those nonverbal cues are. Like, our mothers will give us that look and we know, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Don't even have to say anything.
Right.
So it's important to pay attention to that in our day-to-day life. It helps us respect boundaries, and it helps to nurture empowering relationships.
Yeah, I think it is like 80% of our communication is nonverbal. So
that 80-20 rule again.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And it's interesting too, because it's innate in us. Just like you said, we learn from childhood, and my kids would tell me, Mom, we could always tell when you started gritting your teeth, you just look at us and say, okay, I want you to do this now or whatever, that I mean it. So we do. And actually probably people who experience trauma or deep wounding circumstances or PTSD, they've experienced even more because everything that they did, they wasn't sure if it was going to be okay or, kind of walking on eggshells kind of thing. So it's in us a lot if we just stop. Stop and pay attention to how we feel when we're communicating and how that person's responding, not just what they're saying.
There's a cultural bias towards paying attention to the words only consciously. And a part of that also has to do with how our brains developed, because language is very important. But like what you're saying, spoken word is only 7% of our communication.
Okay.
The remaining 93%,
93%.
is
okay.
our physiology, what we're doing with our gestures, our hands, our feet, our arms, our legs, our breathing, our pupil dilation, our skin tone. And then another portion of that is also our tonality, how we're using our voice. And that communication is so important.
Yeah. So it's even a lot higher than what I said. Yeah. Ignore my statistic. It was wrong.
Well, it's interesting too, if you think about it, because I mean, even just as far as like evolution through society goes, I mean, most of the communication in the very beginning was nonverbal and gestures. Yep. And, you know, that was basically the core of it from the beginning. Yeah,
you're right. Very, very good.
Thank you. But let's talk a little bit about, because we were talking about boundaries and different things like that. In your opinion, what are some of the biggest roadblocks that you've seen from clients that maybe stand in the way of growth and transformation?
The number one roadblock is the belief that you can't change. This is, it's really tough if a client comes in, part of them wants to change, but they don't believe it's possible. We have to help the client start believing change is not only possible, but inevitable for the ball to start rolling. And this is true not just in client work, but in life in general. Some people get stuck in this idea of, well, I'm just how I am. And it's a defense often for maladaptive behavior and uncomfortable states. Well, I'm just this way, so I can't change.
And again, that self-talk is like anchoring that into your brain, isn't it?
Yep. It's anchoring it into the brain. It's justifying something that is not particularly resourceful for the person, because we don't typically say this like when we're in a really positive state, which we should. Like, that's the time to say, well, I'm just this way. That's a really empowering time, but this tends to be said more when somebody is feeling or engaging in something that isn't so resourceful. And that belief, that statement, really messes things up for an individual, because the reality is we live in a constant state of change. Who you are right in this moment is not who you were at the start of this interview. True. It couldn't be.
Right.
There's been lots of information and discussion.
Yep.
And you're not the same as who you were yesterday. You're certainly not the same as who you were a year ago or 5 years ago or as a child.
Permanent. Or who you'll be tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Permanence is an illusion. It's an illusion that was dreamt up by the youngest parts of our brain. Nothing is permanent. That means your states, your emotions, your beliefs are not. Your behaviors are not.
Right.
Change is the only constant, which means you can change. Not only can you change, you will change. The question becomes, do you change unconsciously, meaning not having any control and kind of being at the whims of those around you and context and circumstances, or do you consciously evolve?
Right, which is kind of back to the rules that you gave. When you're being curious and flexible, you want to be open to change and recognizing things that are healthy and good for you, but also recognizing the things that are not and choosing not to go there. And I love the way you put that, because a lot of times I'll tell my clients, everything is temporary. Nobody's getting out of here alive, and nothing is going to last. So when you recognize that, it can even take some of the sting out of something that you're experiencing, because you know that it's going to change, and it could be very quick or it could be drawn out, but you know it's temporary. So it gives you that little bit of padding to be able to get through to the next moment, huh?
Oh, totally. And I love that, because you're right. None of us get out of this alive. So what do you want the quality of your time here to be?
Exactly. Right. And you have that choice. And when you realize you have the choice, I love your information, Jess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the idea of just permanence being a construct from childhood, that's kind of rolling around in my brain right now. I never thought of that before, but
Well, here's the interesting thing. It's not from childhood. It's evolution. Right. So when I say the youngest parts of the brain, I mean like the newest parts of the brain to develop for us as a species.
I gotcha.
Like the frontal cortex. Yeah. Young children do not have permanence.
Right. Everything's new to them. It's like, and curious and
In fact,
I was thinking in my head, like when you're a child, you just kind of assume or think, your parents are always going to be there, or, this type of, because that's just your reality. Concept. It's all right. So you feel like it's going to be permanent, but I see what you're saying. That's really interesting. Could you just explain a little bit more about permanence and that idea, how it's developed over time?
Yeah.
So children are not born with the idea of permanence. Object permanence has to be taught. And it's usually like within the first, it's been a long time since I've taken developmental psychology, like the first year of life, I believe, but it has to be taught.
Interesting.
Because before then, if you have the toy and it disappears, as far as the child is concerned, it's gone forever.
Wow. I gotcha. Yeah. Right. That's a good example. Thank you.
So it has to be taught. It becomes a part of the newer parts of our brains over evolution. So once we learn object permanence, that starts to generalize out to more abstract things.
Okay. Can you kind of give us an example of what you mean by that?
We think we're permanent.
I gotcha.
I mean, like we all know we're not, but I guarantee every single person, unless you're like an enlightened yogi, every single one of us believes we're going to live forever. Like
in the back of our mind.
On a visceral level. It's very difficult, unless you've done certain spiritual practices, it can be very difficult to contemplate mortality.
Right.
We generalize permanence out on kind of like a less dramatic note when we're in any state, any strong state, whether it's negative or positive, any real visceral emotion, we think it's going to go on forever. So if we're in a really positive state, as soon as we realize it's not going to go on forever, that state tends to dissipate. Because we're like, oh man. On the negative side, when we're in a negative state, it's very easy to go, well, I'm just sad and everything's going to be garbage forever.
Right.
So it's like a bad exercise of this idea of permanence.
Right.
But in reality, nothing is permanent. Change is inevitable. So embrace it and use it.
Right. And I guess that would be applicable to relationships oftentimes, because when you're in a relationship, you're truly devoted or loyal to it, or, committed to it, then that in itself is a sense of permanence for you. You don't see how it's not going to last. And when it does just serve for a certain time or purpose in our life, it can be really hard for that person to recover or let go or accept that this was only temporary. Again, that there was a opportunity for you to learn or grow or be given something that you needed assistance in your life, or however it plays out. But it is really, go ahead.
It's good if you're looking for long-term relationships, it's good to go into a relationship hoping and expecting that it's going to be, as permanent as anything else in our physical embodiment is.
Right.
Because if you go into a relationship expecting it to fail, it's going to fail.
Exactly. You want to be able to have the mindset that this is going to last. And actually, if you're going into something, especially something like a marriage, you don't want to go into it with any other thought than this is supposed to. Because you're already setting yourself up. If you're saying, well, I can always get out in the back of your mind or whatever, you're already
where the understanding of impermanence becomes useful is if the relationship breaks up, being able to look back and learn from it. Go, okay, this was temporary, but what can I take from it? Which is really hard, especially at first. But when the time is right, it's a useful exercise. And then understanding that the sadness, the anger, the grief is also impermanent.
Exactly. Very good. Very good words of wisdom. Thank you, Jess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I do find it just interesting. Like, I don't know if oxymoron's the right word, but the only thing that's permanent is change, that's so crazy to think about.
Right.
It makes the brain go.
What do they call that? A paradox or a paradigm?
Yep.
Would that be?
Paradox. Yep.
That's it.
There you go. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So, could you tell us a little bit about your books and the training that you have done or the programs that you offer?
Sure. So, gosh, we have a ton of books. You can find us on Amazon. Just go on Amazon and type in Jess Marion, and you'll find a bunch of books. My most recent book is The Hypnotic Coach, which again is available in paperback or Kindle. And that's
that's the one you have. Yeah,
I think I bought that.
Yes.
It's
the big one.
right here.
Yes, there it is.
Yeah, I bought this, and you even signed it for me, so it's going to be worth lots of money, I'm sure.
Yes.
I don't know if you can see that, but
yeah.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, very good.
So this book is this was a labor of passion, and both labor and passion emphasized. It took a long time. It's a big book, and it's basically it really goes into the details of like small chunk details of client work, at least how I form the foundation of my client work.
Yeah.
So it's influenced by hypnosis, NLP, HNLP. We go through different frameworks for change, different patterns and techniques. I would also like to emphasize that it is not the sum total of my client work, because it would, first of all, be impossible to write a book that size. I don't think anybody would read a 1,000-page book. And also, I am continuing to evolve as a practitioner. Right. So that book really gives you a strong foundation and builds out a toolkit that allows you to take your skills and further develop them and allow them to evolve into something that is uniquely you as a practitioner.
I love that. That's, I think, one reason why I bought it. I saw several different choices, and I was kind of drawn to that one when I was looking at it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And the training programs too, you offer coaching and
right. So we offer throughout the year different training programs. You can visit us at theintelligenthypnotist.com. And just the explanation of the name, it's not just us. You guys are the Intelligent Hypnotist too, because we're a community.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And that extends to everybody. So if you're interested in if you're interested in learning NLP, HNLP, hypnotherapy, we offer trainings, and we also do specialized workshops. My business partner, Sean, does a lot of work with the tarot and integrating the tarot into coaching and hypnosis. He's teaching a pre-conference at HypnoThoughts Live this year. I'm teaching a post-conference that is a retreat for hypnotists, but not only hypnotists. So it's at HypnoThoughts Live, but you can certainly attend not being a formal hypnotist.
Right. And learn a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Experience a lot of different personalities and everything, huh?
Oh, 100%. And it's going to be a time to explore your inner world. We'll be doing lots of different mind-altering experiences.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
We need to sign up.
The first time I ever went to a conference was the same year that I actually got certified in NLP and in hypnosis. It was 2008. And I remember I went to the conference in, Marlboro or whatever, NGH conference. And it was my first experience and taking all of the classes, because you've got one after the other. And if you attend them all, you could attend, anywhere from 5 to 8 in a day. Right.
Yeah.
And then I took my NLP there with Dr. Will Horton. And so I spent 5 days prior, working on that certification. So it was interesting though, because by the time I came back home, my brain was so stimulated. My dreams were like just really expanded and vivid. Exactly. And my thoughts, and it does open up and bring in awareness that, and not everything you're going to believe or work with or care to believe or work with, but there's enough there that it, like you said, the flexibility and being open and seeing what works with you and your belief system and your, what you're inspired and what you connect to, you can really get some education and stimulation out of that. Huh?
And this is really, I think you've hit on something really important about finding what resonates with you. It's very, there is a trap in the hypnosis world of falling into a cookie cutter model of hypnosis. I see this with some people who rely on scripts alone. And ultimately, it's the relationship that creates change. So the more authentic you can be with yourself and with your clients, the more you pursue the things that interest you, that light you up.
And you're even inspired to understand what they need because you're more open to feeling their spirit, to asking the right questions and being able to adjust according to what comes out when you're working on building that rapport. Because you may go into it thinking it's one thing and it turns out completely different with just a few questions, right?
100%. Yeah. And, like when I first started, because my background was in science, was in medical anthropology, I had a very science mindset. And I really felt that I needed to approach client work from a very kind of clinical mindset, a very science-based approach, which works for some people really wonderfully.
Right.
And I still do that sometimes if it's an appropriate client. But in doing that, I really cut myself off from a whole lot of other skill sets that I was not accessing when I was just kind of in the left brain.
Right.
So if you can holistically embrace all of who you are, you become a far more effective change worker.
Yeah,
I love that.
Jinx. But seriously, like whenever you align with your authentic self too, it's almost like you sort of attract the clients that need you and that you need too,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If I have clients who want to talk about neurons firing, we can do that. I have clients who want to have a tarot reading. I can do that too. It's all good.
I love it.
I was going to say too, with the way you developed and grew into this and with the schooling you had prior, it does give you a little bit more of an opportunity to make the adjustments that for that personality, or that, if it's somebody in the left brain and they're strictly scientific, you need to be able to adjust. If it's all about emotions, you need to be able to adjust. If it's about bells and whistles, being able to recognize the different personalities and adjust accordingly. And I think that you give a lot of that information in your book here, and I encourage that too. As a instructor, I encourage, you're learning something that somebody else developed, and you're learning something that works. So you could just follow it, like you said, kind of cookie cutter and follow it, and it will work for a lot of people. But what you want to do is you want to put your own personality and your own talents and your ability to adjust and grow. Yeah. I just love that. Yeah. Very good.
You'll attract clients who are more ideal for you. And it's how you avoid burnout. It's how you avoid boredom as a practitioner. Because, each client is going to be different, and you have a wider breadth of skills and metaphors and techniques if you embrace all of who you are. Like some people are going to be purely science, and that's totally fine. Some practitioners are going to be purely more on the spiritual side. Fine. Know yourself and be authentic to who you are.
It also gives them a chance to pick and choose, because, you can encourage them too. Sometimes I might be somebody that you just connect to and you belong here. And there may be sometimes that you need something a little bit different, and being able to have that freedom of choice, keeps it open, and they're going to appreciate that too, coming from you. Right.
Yeah. Trust your instinct. One of the biggest disservices we can do for ourselves and for clients is to take on a client who, during the initial consultation, our instinct said no.
Very good. Great advice.
Yeah, definitely. And since we did bring up burnout, do you have any advice for people who are dealing with burnout? Because what I gathered from what you're saying too is like aligning with your authentic self seems to be a good way to avoid burnout. But that's a topic that's been popping up for me a lot recently too. So I'm just curious if you have any advice.
So definitely being authentic to yourself, having self-care rituals will help that. Become curious. If you're experiencing burnout, what aspect of your experience is actually producing that? Is it that you have too many clients in a day? Is it that you have too many clients with the same issue? Is it something that's happening in your personal life? Really narrow it down to what are these specific things that are causing the experience for you, because it might be to reduce the burnout. It might be as simple as doing something different with your scheduling.
Yeah, right. Or just like rebooting or taking a step back and self-care. There's very
so
good.
you want to the best way to prevent burnout is to troubleshoot it before it starts. So the triggers that would create it for one person are going to be different than for another. So becoming aware of what is happening when you experience it then allows you to step back when you need to and to adjust. Like I said, sometimes it's just a practical adjustment. I used to, when I first started my practice, I was seeing clients from 8 a.m. till 9 p.m.
Wow.
I don't recommend doing that. It's awful. I don't do that anymore. My sessions are much longer now and I see fewer clients in a day because I know myself.
Right.
So sometimes just practical adjustments will help you avoid burnout. If you make those practical adjustments and they're not, completely resolving it, then we need to look at the bigger picture of daily life. And this is where it becomes really important to start integrating some spiritual practices, some self-care practices. This might be an ideal time to experiment with your diet and experiment with things like nootropics, if that's something that interests some listeners. And really define
nootropics.
So nootropics are substances. They tend to be things like specific amino acids that will influence our state. So things like L-phenylalanine, 5-HTP, L-tryptophan.
I got you. There you go.
Yeah, these amino acids and other neuropeptides and that sort of thing will help us to manage our brains better. I'm a big fan of nootropics. They're smart drugs would be probably the
right. And we've heard a lot about that as they've been coming out more and more.
Yeah.
And just not to get off topic or anything, but is there one that you find that encompasses enough that it actually helps to brighten your brain or brighten your ability to think more clearly or process?
Right. Yeah. So this is the caveat of I do not give medical advice. I'm not saying anybody should take this stuff.
Very good. Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Full disclaimer. Yeah. So it depends on the context and it depends on you. So you have to kind of experiment. So if I want to feel a bit brighter, I take, before I go to the gym, for example, I want to have a really crisp mind in the gym. So in the morning, I take L-phenylalanine.
I gotcha.
Which is natural. It's the substance that makes chocolate really good for us and makes us feel good.
Nice.
Without the calories.
Yeah. It's a dopamine precursor. Mm-hmm. So it fires off the circuits that want us to seek reward, which means we're going to work with better precision and better clarity. That's one. I also take something, I forget, it's a substrate of magnesium that is supposed to be able to cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah, there's like 5 different magnesiums. I was just studying that about 6 months ago because I was having some issues with a little bit of a brain fog from the hormone change and needing to sleep better at night. So there's like 5 different ones or 6 different ones. Yeah. And they work for different things. So that's important to do your research and make your own decisions with that, right? Not giving advice, but
and there's 1 or 2 types of magnesium that have an influence on the digestive system. So you do have to do your research. I take something called MagMind, which is like magnesium theo something, which it helps during the day, and then it also helps with sleep.
Right.
The other one is L-theanine, is very good for crisp mind, which you get naturally if you drink tea. It is what's in tea. So it's the tea version of caffeine. So it's a lot gentler on the system, but you get the benefits, the mental benefits.
Not the same type of acids either, right?
No.
Awesome. Yeah. And I don't want to take you into something that you're giving advice again, like you said, but I've done a lot of research and I'm always learning, and for myself I've got 7 children, and 14 grandkids. And so we work on different things all the time with what might be happening with the body or the mind, but mine specifically, that's why I asked that. It was more for me because I've been trying to sharpen some of the fog because my language is just not as clear as it was. And I know it has to do with, the hormones, and I went through menopause and everything. But I want to strengthen my brain. And so I was just asking.
Definitely sleep is going to be an important component of that as well. Quality sleep will help.
I know. Yeah. We've been talking about that a lot lately.
Well, we did briefly mention when we were talking about burnout, the possibility of finding relief from that by engaging in maybe some spiritual practice. And I was wondering if maybe you could tell us a little more about your Deep Trance Identification programs and some of the spiritual coaching that you do?
Sure. So DTI is slightly different from the spiritual work, although there is a crossover in the biggest sense of like spirituality. DTI is basically this idea that you can leverage trance to model people who are doing things or being in the world in ways that we want to be. So I can model, say, I'm never going to be like an Olympic level weightlifter, but I can certainly model an Olympic lifter to better my technique and to better my thought process going into the lifting. There is a deductive way of doing that by like going through the models like meta programs and values and that sort of thing. But unless you have a direct access to your model, it's kind of hard to do. And even then it's still conscious mind. And DTI, on the flip side, invites you to have as many reference experiences of the model as possible. So watching videos, listening to interviews, reading books, really dreaming into them. And then we use specific hypnotic techniques to really build that internal avatar of that model so that you can access that way of being in the context you want the skills. That's how I initially learned hypnosis, by the way.
Really?
Wow.
It was through DTI. And I didn't even know I was doing it at the time. It wasn't until several years later. So it's a really powerful skill. Children do this all the time when they're pretending to be, superheroes and
princess.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that they're going to become those things, but what it means is that they're modeling certain cultural values that have been taught to them. And they're doing it through a trance.
It lifts you into a different mindset completely. Yeah. Very good.
So cool.
So DTI, it's a 10-session program. It's intense. So it's not for everybody. I have a pretty strict screening process for it. But it's basically you use hypnosis to become someone else for a little while. So that ultimately at the end of the 10-session program, you become better than the sum total of that other person and your previous self. You create something better.
It's like you're combining.
So cool.
It's like you're combining who they are and what they've done and every experience that you can. That's really cool.
Taking the best of both.
Yeah, and it's a really cool thing when it's done right because it works. I worked with a number of people. There was actually, let me back up. This all came out of the work of a guy named Rykov in the 1960s, who was helping the Soviet Union excel in music. And he did a lot of different experiments where he took people through an early DTI process that he created. And then these students would go for their exams, and the people who went through DTI scored better than the people who had regular hypnosis and the people who didn't have anything.
Right.
Wow.
Fast forward, some of the clients I've worked with have allowed me to share the outcomes of their DTI, which have included improvement in drawing, vast improvement in musical performance and artistic expression.
Wow.
So it works. It's really powerful. It's not for everybody.
Right.
But it is a great area if you're looking for a very specific type of skill that you want to nurture.
Right. And that would work for sports performance too, wouldn't it?
Yep, absolutely.
Very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're going to play basketball like Michael Jordan, but it does mean that you'll have a better understanding of mechanics, an inherent embodied understanding of the mechanics, and a better inherent understanding of what's happening in the head.
The mindset.
the sport. Yep.
Exactly.
That's so interesting.
That's one of the reasons why hypnosis alone can be so effective for sports performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Because so much of it is in the mind.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, well, so then let's go into maybe the more spiritual aspect of it.
Right. So the spiritual coaching, I get clients with some clients, it's more expressed, like they come because they feel like they have a curse placed on them, or they're stuck in a bad karmic loop, or they're interested in past lives. So they have a very specific spiritual need that they believe hypnosis can resolve. Hey, sometimes I don't know whether or not they did have a curse placed on them, whether or not they do have an entity that's hanging around. Maybe yes, maybe no. That's not really important to me.
Right.
I have found, in my own worldview, I've seen enough to say if they end up being my client, they probably do have something going on, because we do have to screen out people who do have a tenuous grasp with the outside world.
Right.
So we can do that type of work, because once you alter your state, once you get out of the kind of beta brainwave state, and hypnosis does not have a specific brainwave signature, just to be clear, this is a metaphor.
Right.
But once you get out of kind of this normal consciousness, once you dip into these alternate states, you have more access to a greater amount of your embodied experience, your emotional experience, and your energetic experience.
Right.
So that's, if something is happening with a client at the level of energy, we can work with that, but they need to alter their state first.
Right.
Interesting.
And this could be true or not true. I mean, they may or may not, like you said, they may or may not be being haunted by somebody or experiencing something that's out of body, out of mind. But the belief or the feeling of it or the energy of it and all of that combined can still have the same effect on them. So being able to get them into a different mindset in order to help them to come away from it or to release it or whatever you're going to do. Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's interesting. It can be very challenging work. I don't think it's for every practitioner. If that's a type of work that interests you, I kind of straddle between, sometimes I get a sense that it's a metaphor with a client, and I'm happy to use that metaphor.
Exactly.
Sometimes I get the sense that something else is going on. And if you choose to do that work, you better have a spiritual practice yourself.
Right. And there's a therapeutic part of it too. So you need to make sure that you have the skills in therapy, to help manage some of those things, because you can unplug some stuff that you may not be able to manage if you're not.
Yeah. And this is the thing. If we take it outside of the metaphor, and let's just say a client comes in with one of those issues and it's real, which who knows, in the quantum field, it could be. If you help them change their emotional state, if you raise their emotional vibration, to steal another metaphor, if you help clear whatever's happening in their psychology, that stuff can't hang on.
Right. It can give them the power to release or let go, whether it's real or whether it's, a state of mind. Right. Yeah.
So that's on the therapeutic side. On the generative side, a lot of my coaching in general is going to involve some aspect of spirituality, whatever that is. It doesn't mean religion. That means getting a person in touch with something greater than themselves, whatever that is for that person, because that's really important. Clients, especially if they're coming for generative change, you want to get them outside of their traditional concept of self. You want to move them beyond their envisioned identity, because they want to be beyond their envisioned identity.
Right.
So they have to move into this space of being able to create new distinctions for themselves. And that tends to be a spiritual experience. I also, especially if I'm working with someone long-term, whether the focus is generative or it's somebody who has things like trauma and it's going to be a longer therapeutic relationship, I do encourage specific practices. I think it's very important to have a daily meditation practice.
Yeah. Right.
Whatever meditation you want to do, but an actual meditation practice, because this is going to teach mental discipline.
Yeah.
It also helps them to connect, like you said, spiritually. So whether they believe in God and they want to do it prayerfully, and communicate with him on a daily basis, or whether they want to connect with the energy of the earth and what their belief system is, or somewhere in between. And that's important as a hypnotist too, or a neuro-linguistic programmer, or even a life coach, is to be able to adjust, again, like you said, according to what their belief system is, and be able to communicate with them on their level without judgment, and help them, to work through where they're at.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, if you have a client who's completely like left brain science minded, there's plenty of evidence to support a daily practice of meditation through the scientific lens. It does a lot for mental health. Yeah. And we know on the side, for those of us who are more spiritually minded, that it will help to connect someone to something more. So that's kind of the first thing that I really stress with practically every client, is they need to have a daily practice, and to start small. If you haven't meditated before, do not think you're going to sit there for an hour.
Right.
I've been meditating since I was 12, and I don't sit there for an hour.
Right.
Start with a minute or two.
Exactly. Just quiet your mind and get into that space, right?
Deep
Right.
breaths.
And deep breaths. There's lots of different short techniques out there. You can search the internet. Google has a ton of ideas about meditation. But what's important is not the length, but the fact that you set the time aside every day to do it.
Yeah, I
It's,
really appreciate that.
some people, it benefits them to do the same time every day. I can't do that because of my schedule. But I know at some point every day I better do this, or I'm going to feel a bit off
For
kilter.
yourself.
Yeah.
For your own self-care.
And even just
So-
that short amount of time can make such a huge difference.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And with,
it's
and with
huge
this kind of
difference.
work too, because we're always given so much of ourselves,
Yeah.
whether it's
Yeah.
energetically or whether it's emotionally or whether it's empathetically, so many different levels that if we don't even do that for our own self-care, whether it's starting your day with a prayer of gratitude or whether you go into a meditative state or do it all, you can do more than one, modality, right?
Yeah.
Well, this actually leads me into the second thing that I've been playing with for a while, and I'm going to start doing it with clients. So I haven't tested it yet with clients, so I'm not sure how it's going to go over, but you guys are like on the ground floor, is introducing the idea of having daily ritual. Now we have tons of daily rituals. We have ritual for brushing our teeth. We have ritual for going to bed. Most of these rituals are unconscious. This is not what I'm talking about.
Right.
Having a ritual that connects you with sacredness, whatever is sacred to you, and having make it special. It's usually beneficial for it to be at least at some points more solitary. So it's more time for just you. It could be, for some people, it could be prayer. For, some people who are more religious, it could be an actual religious ritual they do. Other people, it could be, tuning into the vibrations of their crystals. For some people, it could be doing a tarot reading. As long as for you, it connects you with a sense of sacredness, a sense of magic with a capital M. Then it becomes really powerful because it infuses the rest of your day with that sense of sacredness. So you're again connecting with something that's bigger. And
there you go. Very good.
Very slowly, you'll start to realize that the world is not what we think it is. The world is not what we were taught it is. And it's really good to start to recognize that.
Yeah, there's always something more.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I love that.
That's a Dina-ism. Write
Yeah.
it down. She's been keeping up with some of my Dina-isms. I think we're going to do a little book.
I
Nice.
literally got one started.
Oh, awesome.
She says the best stuff.
Well, and a lot of it we hear from someplace else and we have our own take on it, or we have, our own little twist, or we're even repeating it, but it feels like it's coming from us. So hopefully I won't have anybody come after me when we finish it.
It's a meme out in the universe anyway, once it's said. So.
Exactly. We're all learning something from somebody, aren't we?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So where do you see the future of personal development?
That's a big one. So I think it's going to this emphasis on self-care and self-exploration is going to continue to grow. And I see it going in two very distinct directions. And I'm sure there are more, but kind of the two trends that are big right now. The first is the explosion of neurotech. So things like the Muse, things like, I forget what it's called, any of the personal EMF devices. So tech that either lets you see what your brain's doing, tech that allows you to integrate with like an app to enhance meditation. This is what Muse does. Tech that alters brain states. That's what personal EMF devices do.
Interesting.
I see that going in one direction. It's useful for meditation. There's also specific neurotech that's for sports enhancement, sports performance. There is neurotech for things like improving mood. I haven't tested those ones yet. So there's like little wearable devices that say they can increase serotonin and dopamine. I don't know. But the fact that they're even thinking this way, whether or not the tech right now does it, is really impressive. I do have a personal EMF device. I have a Muse as well. Those definitely work, which is very cool.
So cool.
So
Do you have concerns with everything turning so technical that everything is being created like artificially, and will we lose the ability to do this on our own? Or would it be good to stand back and always recognize where it's coming from and continue to develop our own abilities to be able to manage, our brains or our body or our emotions or whatever it is? What do you think about that?
It's so funny you should ask this question. This was actually the topic of my undergrad honors thesis.
Wow.
Yeah, back in 2005. So that's really cool. I didn't come to a conclusion on it, by the way. So I think, honestly, where the tech is right now, so you take something like a personal EMF device, it will influence brainwaves, but it doesn't give you enlightenment. It doesn't give you moksha or satori. You still have to work.
I got you.
So these become aids. So like if I have the Muse headband, I don't use that so much for meditation. I use it, I wear it as I meditate, but I use it with an app that lets me actually visualize my brainwave activity. So I can track when there's spikes of specific waves, because then that gives me visual feedback to let me know, okay, well, when I was having this experience, this is what was happening internally. So it lets me reinforce certain positive behaviors.
Gotcha.
I don't think right now we're at a point where any one device will, make us meditate or make us enlightened. It's just not what the tech does. They're aids. If we do ever get to that point, then it becomes a really interesting question. I tend to believe that ultimately we won't be able to create that, because these mystical experiences are not produced from brainwaves alone. But this leads me to the second where I see personal development going, and that is the Renaissance of Psychedelics. And this is what gets me excited, because they're a tool for personal growth. They're the lightning path for healing and therapeutic change. They're not for everybody. Caveat again, definitely not for everybody. They're a fast path to therapeutic change for generative use over time. I do believe with the right set and setting, they make us better human beings. They make us better partners with nature. They make us better partners with each other.
Yeah, I think that's how it's used and how it's guided too.
Yeah. And ultimately they do create, in the right set and setting and dosage, they do create mystical experiences.
Yeah, I've ran across quite a few people in the most recent, probably 2 years, of everything from like ashwagandha to, frog medicine. And you've heard more of it being educated, like Joe Rogan talking about his experiences and everything. And there is a lot more out there, and it scares a lot of people. And I think that, using it as a way to, and enhance some sort of psychedelic experience isn't what this is about. You're talking about actually using it to heal, to release trauma, or to go in and stop addiction, or let go of the things that are the low, deep driving force behind some of that. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I also don't have a problem with taking them for fun. I think that's fine too. But I think there is a danger in that, though.
Right. Because people use those kind of things. It's just like drinking or anything else. They use them for escape. And fortunately with the classical psychedelics, they're non-addictive physically, and they create tolerance in a very short period of time. So you can't take them daily. Gotcha. Because you would have to double the dose each day to get the same effect as you had day one. So it's just not tenable. Yeah. I didn't know that. Right. And that would be dangerous. Right. Obviously you'd be going into it's just not good for the system. And what do you get out of it at that point? Right. Now, the other danger is if it's purely for fun, if the set and setting are not correct, then there's an opportunity for, they call it a bad trip. Well, there's no such thing as a bad trip. We have bad trips during therapeutic change as well. It's just the frame you put on it. And if there aren't kind of if there isn't this sacred container for it, it becomes a little bit more difficult to make meaning of those experiences. But it's not to say, people
people have been using these things since we were not humans.
Since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
It's been around for a long time, and I'm sure there's a purpose and a reason for it all. And again, using it for the right purpose and right reason, it could be beneficial. And it's not recommended. Nobody's going in and saying you need to do these things.
Absolutely not.
But this is part of the reason we're doing this podcast, because we want to be able to educate people that there's so much more out there than just what Western medicine or just, what we're told or have been told for many years, that there's a lot that you can find within yourself. Yeah. And thank you for being one of the many educators. And this kind of went into a little bit of a different turn, but again, opening up the opportunity to educate people is why we're here with you today.
Yes.
And I will say this about the sacred medicine work. There's a tremendous amount of science backing it up that's come out in the last 10 to 15 years, a tremendous amount. Johns Hopkins has a center for consciousness studies, which is all about psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
So does NYU. I think Columbia might be starting one. Imperial College has put out a lot of research in the UK. So this is not just like hippies from the 60s.
Well, and there's an indication that they were doing this many, many years ago, long ago,
and
military and
Yeah.
And okay, so this is also with the caveat, especially since this is going on YouTube, disclaimer, I'm not suggesting anybody do it. And also it's federally illegal. So that's also something to keep in mind. But it is powerful stuff. And I think that is where we are going in terms of personal development.
the future, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even when we were speaking with Paul on a previous episode, he was saying how he combines ketamine with his hypnosis sessions to bring even more healing to his clients. I mean, I definitely see it trending that way too.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, there's a lot of it out there, a lot more than people know because it's not mainstream. But do your research, and certainly there is information, and like you said, a lot of science, and don't go out on this, we're not giving any advice, and don't go out on your own under any circumstance. Yeah.
I would say if anybody's interested and wants to learn more, or if this topic makes somebody a little bit afraid or uncomfortable, to read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, or How to Change Your Brain.
Okay, good.
How to Change Your Mind. Yeah. It was a New York Times bestseller for like months and months and months. It's an excellent book. It's a wonderful read, and it will change your mind on the topic, at least most people.
Awesome.
At least on some level, maybe accepting it for something more than just, like psychedelics, right?
Somebody literally suggested that book to me like 2 or 3 days ago. That's the second time I've heard that.
The universe is telling you.
Yeah, noted.
And when you brought up Paul McKenna, I've got an old book of his, Change Your Life in 7 Days or something like that. He's had around for a long time. So there's a lot of different information out there. And it's interesting because the more you educate, the more you open the door, the more comes in. And all of a sudden, when you're closed off to anything, then you don't learn any of this. Yeah. But as soon as you open yourself up to it, the things that bring, again, what resonates with you, what do you connect to, what makes you feel warm and good and intriguing? Because I've always told my clients, if it creates fear or doubt or anxiety or anything that is on a negative level, then for you, it's basically telling you this isn't right.
Yeah.
But if you feel warm, if you feel excited, if you feel connected, or or you want to know more, then, work within yourself and trust your instincts and pursue those things that feel right for you.
Yeah. And if it doesn't feel right, that's not permanent. It's not right for this time.
Exactly. Because things do change. I know, I might have felt a different way when I was 30 and when I was 40 and when I was 50 and when I was 60. Oh, was I just giving away my age?
I didn't hear anything. I heard 30. That's all I heard.
There you go.
Perfect.
I've had people say, well, what are you, 39? I said, no, if I looked like this at 39, I'd look rode hard and hung up wet. No, I don't even want to say I'm 39. If anything, I'll say I'm 69 and somebody go, oh, you look really good for your age.
I like that.
Yeah. It's like, I don't understand somebody who would say that they were a lot less when it's obvious that it's not true. Yeah.
Well, y'all are lovely.
Oh,
and
so
you
are
too.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And that's the overall, everything about you and your energy and what you present and how you look and who you are. And that's what we
Thank
need
you.
to be able to feel about everybody.
Yeah.
So I think she's got a good set of questions here for you if you want to maybe close up. And I would like to invite you to maybe do this again and expand a little bit more or tell
I
us
would
more.
absolutely love to. This
Yeah.
has been
we
so
would
much
be
fun.
So honored. That would
Thank
be
you.
so awesome.
Mhm.
That'd be
But
fun.
first, how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
Sure. So if you'd like to schedule a consultation, you can reach me at the Intelligent Hypnotist at gmail.com.
Very good.
So one word.
Perfect. And all the social media or any
social
other-
media. We have a Facebook, we have a YouTube, we have an Instagram, all under the Intelligent Hypnotist. You can friend me personally on Facebook, and you can or DM me on Facebook. You can reach me there. You can find us through the intelligenthypnotist.com as well.
Okay, great.
Awesome. So this part of the show, we like to ask you a series of fast, fun facts so our listeners can get to know you on a different level. So are you an early bird or a night owl?
Okay, so my nature is a night owl, but my gym schedule has forced me to become an early bird.
Do you know your zodiac sign?
I am a Libra in the Western system. In the Chinese system, I am a water dog.
Oh,
wow.
awesome. That's so cool. What is the one song that gets you hyped up no matter when and where you listen to it?
Jump by Van Halen.
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
that's such a good one. And what is lighting you up and exciting you the most in life right now?
Oh gosh. I mean, just in general, family, friends. I'm very excited about, like we were talking about the psychedelic renaissance that holds my interest on multiple levels right now and really lights me up.
I
There
love
you
it. And if our listeners could walk away with one nugget of wisdom from today's conversation, what would you want that to be?
Be curious.
Mm.
Always be curious.
I love it.
Yep, that'll open you up to getting answers, right?
Yep. And it'll move you beyond limiting beliefs or negative emotions.
There you go.
That's
yeah.
great.
That's great. I did want to tell you that my granddaughter this year, my oldest one, her name's Penelope. She's just turned 15 and she started weightlifting this year and she's always been kind of petite. Yeah. She competed. She won in her weight class and
Awesome. Yay.
Yeah. And so she just started doing that and just this past year and she's really excelled at it. So
That's awesome.
I'm gonna let her know and see if she'll listen to this podcast just so she'll, be inspired. Yeah.
Yeah. Yay, Penelope.
Is she doing powerlifting or Olympic lifting?
I think she's doing some powerlifting. There's a couple of different techniques that she's competed in, and I think that there's one that you stand still. It's the stand and jerk, or what is it called? I don't know.
She's doing Olympic. She's doing Olympic lifting. Cool. That's my area. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So like clean and jerk, snatches.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, that's what she's doing. Right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and she started out, she was probably maybe about 90 pounds or so, pretty petite.
Mhm.
And now she's just told me yesterday, I had picked her up and she said that she was like 106, or she had gained weight. So she did move up into a new weight class.
Mhm.
And she's getting more powerful though. She's really getting strong. You can see her body and her muscular physique developing, but it's not, it's not bulky. It's just developing. Yeah.
How old is she?
She's like 15.
Oh, that's a great time to start.
Her name's Penelope Rose.
Oh, Penelope Rose. Well, congratulations. You are in for a lifetime of fun.
There you go.
Like, that's awesome.
Okay.
Well, it has been such an honor, and we just want to thank you again for coming on the show. And we just hope to have you back soon. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be able to share this time with you and the listeners. And I really enjoyed this. So thank you for inviting me. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Rise and Shine It's Hypno Time podcast. If you found some value in this episode and enjoyed it,
please consider liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star review. Most people may not know that interacting with our content and our channel helps us to continue the work we're doing and reach more people. And we just want to thank you again from the bottom of our hearts for being such a loyal listener. And don't forget to tune in next week and every Tuesday for the latest episode of the Rise and Shine as Hypnotime podcast with Dina and Suzanne. See you next week.